Hey y'all, welcome back to the Takeoff. I am your host, Max Henry. Today I got longtime friend and fellow nerd Dylan Polin on. He is a traditional nerd. Often we are in each other's DMs talking about Lord of the Rings and or Dungeon Crawler Carl, but today we're talking more about the parkour specific nerd stuff. So I've known Dylan since basically day one of the Northeast forums, parkour.net, New England Parkour, Parkour North America. He was at user Loki Lock, and one of the kind of initial minds shaping a lot of the conversation around coaching and parkour versus free running, a lot of those sort of philosophical conversations happening in the more local Northeast US parkour community. Dylan was in on all those. He then went on to start Hub Freerunning up in the Boston area. He organized the Hubbable Jam, which is just absolutely iconic. We share a couple stories from that. It was the first time that I ever realized how much of a hack just like slamming multiple bowls of pho after a 10-hour training session was. And he now is the owner of the Hub facilities. He's got 2 facilities outside of Boston. Despite all that, Dylan can fly under the radar a little bit as a coach. I tend to not see him get invited out to a ton of events as much. I think he's a busy guy, but people underrate what he has done, I think, as a coach and a community leader in the Boston scene. He's helped develop amazing competitive parkour athletes like Brandon Hooper, who's just won his second gold in skill at SPL, Will Hess, who's a silver medalist in speed at SPL, Gio we talk about, who's kind of on the come up and I think will probably be up in the running for a medal this year at SPL in skill again, and many other younger athletes. And he is very intentional about how he shapes his program, how he shapes the way that his coaches interact with their students, the space they're creating, how they incorporate open gym, and just the vibe. I think he is a really great vibe curator. He has a really fantastic take on the role of gyms, the role of competition, and the role of kind of open training, and how all 3 of those things are needed to create this thriving and sustainable parkour ecosystem. And yeah, I think he articulates that really well throughout this episode. So, as always, I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. Let's dive in.
I always think it's a fascinating thing when kids get to see super high level athletes, but they're just people in their community. Like we
Yeah.
actually talk about this a lot at our open gyms, right? For years, right? There's a bunch of kids who come to open gym who are, some of the kids are in classes, some of the kids are just there for open gym, but they've like been training around like Ernest and Brandon and like James and Gio and Will, and they just think that they're dudes that are have a hobby of parkour. They think that that's just what an adult that does parkour looks like, and they're like watching them happen. So like these kids, like a lot of, I think it's been the past year. I think the prominence of especially like Brandon's been a little bit different. Like we had some posters of him up in the lobby. Um, but like for a lot of times, people just thought Brandon was a dude that came in that he was just like average parkour athlete when you're an adult. So
Isn't he
like
that
that,
plumber that sometimes
yeah,
does
yeah, yeah.
parkour?
Dude. But it's like I'm like the level that they're gonna like start thinking that they need to be at to be completely average is world level, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like they just, they see James doing standing up back, and they're like, that's a thing that you should be able to do when you're a regular dude coming in for open gym. I go to parkour class, so I should be, like I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, you're either going to raise another generation of absolute monsters, or lots of kids with like crippling self-doubt and anxiety. There's no in between.
They're like, why
Well,
isn't it
Dylan
just
Polin.
happening for me? Yeah, it's like,
I was gonna say that's a great place to start. Dylan Polin, welcome to the Takeoff, coach
you know,
of generations of kids with crippling anxiety.
dude, I got a pretty big hit list. Got a pretty big list of maybe not take credit for every step in action, but the tree of influence
The tree of
is great.
influence. Well, that's amazing. I've had that same thought at Apex, especially when I would go way kind of like the peak Apex years, because the Colorado scene is still like thriving right now, but it's like people aren't really filming, and there isn't a central, like Apex used to be such a central location, and because of the hours of open gym and people having jobs and stuff, it's more like sporadic. But back in the peak days, I remember kids and their like coaches, their 2 coaches would be Dylan and Brandon, and then they'd like go from that to open gym, and it would be like whoever visiting from all over the world plus Knox and Elijah and all the tryhards. and they're just seeing like, oh yeah, I guess 15-foot running rail precisions, 10 feet up is kind of like the casual entry level for adult parkour. Dylan's just
Yeah.
my coach. He might be kind of good. I don't know. He's like definitely not the most goated American athlete of all time.
Yeah, right.
Which
It's like it's awesome. And yeah, no, the early Apex days were such an influence of like how a gym can be at this like flywheel for a community. Like,
yeah,
visions are similar, origins are similar, like early on. But I remember watching Apex being like, they're unstoppable. I'm like, it's like,
yeah.
just the community. It's like it felt like the mecca trip of America to go out to Apex and and be there. And I don't know if it's if it's an Apex thing or a Colorado thing or just a time thing that has changed that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of that has been that there's not a big event anymore because there was like international, there was Nat Jam. I mean, that was like Hubbable, which, because I think now when I think about the community, because I'm in Colorado, I think there's still hotspots. Like I think LA is a hotspot. It's kind of a different style of hotspot from it's more kind of like content oriented in my opinion. And then Boston is I think the spot for like street training. And I feel like Denver is been quieter from a content perspective, but still is like any day, any session, there's 20 to 30 people out like pretty casually. The other day I just came out when James was in town. James and Naomi Perlman were like, oh, we should do a little session. And it was like Egg, Ross Allen, Logan Frady, Josh Malone, James, Naomi, me, Marquise, Julius, Rob came later, Jared Hulu was gonna come. Like it was just such a stacked squad of like random Tuesday afternoon training session.
Yeah.
And looking at what's at the spot, you're like, oh, this is actually like we're about to get kicked out by this dude. And he was like, why are you guys even here? This building is closed. It was like we are training at like an off hours like government building that's getting renovated soon. And I was just like, this is literally if you picked an Olympic roster of the US athletes, it would be like this group of 15 people and like five other people. But I was just like, you don't understand that you're getting to see world class parkour just casually at your job as you're like blowing leaves off of this abandoned government
Yeah, yeah,
building.
yeah.
And it's so sick how when gyms can be that too. And I feel like Hub has always been that. But I guess how do you feel like Hub and maybe, like, going back to Hubbable, what was it like organizing the early Hubbable days? Like, what was your goal with Hubbable back in the day?
Um,
Other than
so
to
how
get
about
me the best and worst training because day 1 was great, and then day 2, I was either always sick and or hungover from St. Patty's Day.
yeah, yeah. Um, so the original idea of Hubbable was like it was the kind of the era in parkour where there was a lot of nat jams, right? Like I'm sure Colorado was there, but still like, there was a lot of these jams going, and we're like we should, Karin was like one of the original members of Hub Freerunning was like we should have a jam, and we just kind of like spitballed around, and I think like we just kind of quickly made like a Facebook event, and we like we're like Hubbable because everything that we've ever done has just been like this pun, play on words, or some sort of immature butt joke or something like that. And what do you call it? So we're like, we should do a Nat Jam. And then going into it, I know like at the time, Dante was releasing the Friends films videos, which
Yeah.
actually like I haven't watched them again, so I don't know how they hold up. But I feel like those had such a moment in like 2011, 20, if I'm being right about my
Mhm.
my time. And Dante was like on top of the world, like all of them were making these videos that I feel like were super inspirational. And Chris Rowan reached out to them. They ended up coming out. I remember like that was like our first Hubble one. That's kind of what blew it up, I think, because like I think people, were like, oh, there's these pro athletes that are, coming out, and like Dan Teal was, like I think
Oh,
one of,
the GOAT. Dan Teal, so
yeah,
Brandon Hooper reminds me, there's a body type that Dan Teal, Dylan, and then Brandon Hooper all share. Like when I see him move, I'm like, oh, he looks like peak Dan Teal way back in the day.
interesting.
Because for the listener who doesn't know Dan Teal, he was like got off the couch, 11-foot level standing pre triple A twists, triple B twists. I think he was the first to triple ABC in parkour. Definitely in the US, but maybe even in the world. And Dante can correct me if I'm wrong because he'll probably listen to this. But
Yeah.
yeah, he was like
Some people have the gifted.
2010 insane. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like that was helpful, and that's like what blew it up. And I remember we thought we'd have like a handful of people come. I was working at Nessa at the time, and that was like we created the gym session as like a form of fundraiser for our build at the gym because the gym wasn't going to give us any money. So I was like, oh, if we do like an overnight and we charge like or like a gym session and overnight, more people will be able to come. We'll have money. We'll be able to build out like a park out back. And then like 300 people showed up, and we're at Chinatown or Josiah Quincy, and like we're getting booted, and we're sprint. There's hundreds of kids sprinting down the streets, and it was like I think when people meme and think about what do you do when you're doing parkour in the city, and they're like, do you just run around? I'm like, it was that. Like we stormed through like downtown crossing in Boston. It was like hundreds of people like swinging on bars and flipping into the street, and I was like, this is sick, but I was also like, this feels very close to being a mob right now, like going into it. It was
Yeah, that's so true. Now, my memories of the original Hubbables, the first couple were it was insane. It was so fun. It was also just like, to your point, there was the PKNY Jam, which was the old school New York guys. There was
yep.
Beast Coast, and a lot of the East Coast jams and the older East Coast communities were like, I want to say conservative for lack of a better word. They were pretty, it was very like rooted in the sort of ethos of parkour. And Hubbable was the first event that was run by people from our generation where it felt like, yeah, we're not gonna have a 3-hour conditioning session at the end of
Yeah, yeah.
this. It's just gonna be like tons of fun. You're probably gonna pick up pneumonia sleeping on the floor of this gym and inhaling foam pit particles. And also, you're gonna meet like random 11-year-olds who are way better than you. I don't remember which Hubbable it was, but it was probably I think it was like maybe it was Shay and Aiden. I remember seeing some of the kind of up and coming the guys who are now like some of the best in the world when they were 12 or 13 at Nessa. So who are some of the kids that got their start? They're not kids anymore, obviously, but
Yeah, I
who
know,
are some
dude.
of
They're
those
like,
Boston folks that got their start at Nessa back in those
dude, yeah,
days?
they're grown ass men now. It's like actually like,
Yeah.
some of them like they're getting married, and I'm like, no, like you're kids. And it's actually funny as being like becoming a parent, but also becoming older. It's like watching them. It's like when we were shutting down Norton, the hub Norton. I'll get to Nessa in a second, but I remember like looking back at like our first bunch of pictures and seeing like little Will and little Gio and Brandon, and like being like, I'm like, oh my, dude, it killed me. And the same thing when I like look at some of these like old videos from Nessa. And so Nessa was like, there's a couple people who are like maybe don't have crazy prominence now, but like Solomon Berg was like an early standout. He's kind of an influencer type of
Mm-hmm.
guy now, still doing some flips. Martin Miller was
Loves a
really early on.
croc.
Yeah, yeah. Martin Miller was early on. James West started out in my parkour classes, and we ran a program at the same time as Nessa, but we ran it in like another place. The thing they called Project Freerun, and he was in my parkour classes for a while, and then I had one of my tricking friends, Daylon Austin, come and do like a tricking seminar with the kid. Just be like, oh, this is what it is, and it's just like I I'm like pretty sure that's what got
See ya.
James bought, But I know James asked me the other day. He was like, you remember I like started in your classes, right? I was like, yeah, James, I was an adult. I remember. I'm like, I was like, um, so James was there. But I think like it's one of those things I've actually reflected on it a bunch of like, oh, Z came from Nessa. He was a
Yeah,
gymnast,
I
but
remember
like
seeing Z at some of the early ones. I was like, who is this
it
like
caused a lot of
13-year-old
conflict
kid?
in the gym because it was like Nessa was a very highly competitive gymnastics program. Like they were kind of the big bad guys in the Northeast region, and I came in with parkour, and it's like we're messing around, we're having fun, and like Z Mon, a couple of these other like really high level gymnasts, like like gymnastics is tough. It's 30 hours a week. Like they have this Armenian coach who's beating their asses, and then they're like, oh, I can just do the same stuff and just it could be fun. And so I remember like me and the coach literally getting into a fist fight of like when Z and like Mon were like starting to like remove themselves from gymnastics because it's like I took their like star people, like And
Wait, who won the fist fight?
it was like this big push. I mean, we didn't get to like full
How
fight,
many
but I was like,
rounds? Okay.
it was like 11 2-minute rounds. We had a big ring, like, um, but that was like a huge point of kind of contention always in the gym because it was like, also I've hated gymnastics since before it was cool because of this also. Um, just for the kids to know before Fig, I was hating long.
Pre-fig. I have a rocky relationship with gymnastics as well because I was a gymnast as a young kid and just remember how brutal. I don't even want to say the training is hard. I think the training is just dumb. I honestly, I think the way that gymnastics from a sports science perspective and if exercise physiology, like they could get so much more if they just didn't. American athletes still to this day seem like at USAG, they're like, okay, well, the Russians figured it out in 1960. If you just abuse all of your athletes until they burn out in 19, that's 17 to 19 year period. They're going to just be killing it. And I'm like, guys, you realize that they probably were all on steroids. All of those kids had mental and emotional health issues. Like it's so horrible. And physically also, it's just like, I have so many issues with how many gymnastics places are coaching. It seems like USAG is getting better after they've had scandal after scandal after scandal, and finally the sports community is like, hey, gymnastics is actually horrible objectively for like particularly young girls. We should probably figure out how to make it less so. I'll stop ranting about that right
Well,
now.
well,
In
one more
case
one
there's
more
any
point. It's
gymnastics
also,
coaches on here, just
yeah.
do it right.
Well, one more point about it is that I'm like, what I feel like I've always been watching with gymnastics progression is like, I feel like they're like you see people who get to these crazy heights, but like it's an insane survivorship bias of the athlete who actually thrives
Yes.
in that type of coaching environment, and their way of their progression of stacking skill bases on top of each other. It does work for a certain type of athlete, to have like this, very what I've actually appreciated about gymnastics
Yeah.
is like a very clear fundamental base that they build upon, and it's but there's like no adaptability in it, and so it's like if one little thing goes wrong in
Mm-hmm.
how they set for their tuck or something like that, it's like they don't have this um they haven't trained these other sides of it. Like there's like this, I don't know. And
Yeah.
so
No, I
it's always
agree.
one of those things where I'm like,
Whenever
sorry, go on.
I talk about it with my mom put me in gymnastics as a kid, which now is I ironic. It's like I stopped when I was 10 because I basically like had two bails back to back. I like broke my foot bailing a back handspring because we'd done so my team won New York State's boys gymnastics. I came first in floor when I was like 9 years old and I was in like the top three in the state and went to regionals and stuff. And then because of that, me and this other kid, they just like beat us into the ground. You get really strong. Like I think one thing that gymnastic does really well is the strength, but the to your point, because it's all built around competition and routine. I mean, it's like that word routine. It's called a gymnastics routine because you don't want it to change. So your goal is not to like embrace variability, it's to completely negate the potential for variability, which is actually the opposite of what a healthy movement practice should probably do from like a preparing you for life and exercise and fitness perspective. And my mom put me in it because she was like, I want you to be able to, you're jumping all over the place. I want you to be able to like land safely and know how to move your body. And it was the best option at the time when I was 3 in 1996. But now when I compare it to something like parkour, you're like, okay, well, yeah, a gymnast does round off back handspring and then they mistime the set on their double full and you see the gnarliest bails ever because they can only do it at 100% or 0%.
Yeah, yeah,
And it is so fascinating.
yeah. It's a whole, it's a whole
Not all
thing,
of them,
and
obviously, but that's the way that the training system, to your point, the survivorship bias, like the training system is created to weed out anybody that doesn't match the preset criteria, as opposed to thinking like, how can we apply the benefits of this sport to each individual? But what did you take? Did your experience at Nessa inform the creation of Hub, the first Hub?
so I was at Nessa for a number of years. We had built out like a park out back, but we had like some stuff built in there. But this was kind of during one of parkour's first like boom cycles, and so we started to have like a lot of people coming in. We were starting to fight for space, and I just knew we needed a space that was like I could control not only like the vibe of what was going on, because you're going into a gym and you're just like there's a bunch of like little girls being screamed at, and you're an adult or a teen, and very quickly you're like, I don't know,
It's for
this isn't
kids.
screaming parkour to me. Plus, being able to
Yeah.
have, this is when like parkour gyms are starting to develop more. It's like the opening of Tempest happens. I'm like, oh my God, like this is what a parkour gym could be. And then actually, so I think it was actually a pretty big negative keyword or negative impact for building Hub, where I was like, Hub, I was like, it's gonna be all, you know, all wood. It's gonna be, like, street setting. We kind of had these ideas of like, should Hub try to replicate an outdoor situation,
Hmm.
accurately, or should it be like hard surfaces and everything, but like situations that you can never find outside, which is more what parkour gyms should do. In it, I was like, should we buy an electric box? Should we buy a light post? Or should we build,
Yeah.
whatever?
That would be
Um,
sick to see someday, but
yeah, and it was like, naivety, like, I was like 24 when I opened, when I signed the lease for Hub. And so I was like, I was like, oh, I'll spend the first month building out the lobby. We'll do all of our everything. And then the next month we'll build out the gym. And then it's like I have fucking one wall built. And I'm like, this took so long. And cost way more money than I thought. And if anybody had been to Hub when we first opened, it was sparse might be a good word
it was
to
basically
use.
just the outsides and then that like first section, but it was still really fun. I mean, I think trying to remember if there were any gyms. I think that was right around the time Brooklyn Zoo opened, but Brooklyn Zoo just had the bottom floor, which was garbage for parkour. So that when Hub opened, I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, this is so worth the trip to Boston just to have an indoor space to train that is not like 9 foot elevated bar cage and a foam pit."
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, I mean, there's there's like good and bad parts of it. Like, like obviously I wish that we had been able to do something more at scale of the gyms that I'm opening now, but also I think it was like a fantastic thing for all the kids there who were brand new to parkour, had never seen it before. And like we got to evolve the gym around their skill bases and around who was actually there. And the kids who were coming early on got to see the gym evolve and add on throughout the years. And if anybody was at Hub Norton in the late, before we closed, it got like, it was cluttered might be a good word for it, but it's like, just got like nerd every week. I'd be like, oh, we can do something new here. And it's like 10 years of that. And it's, really cool, like technician parkour gym. If you don't want to run or vault, like if you just want to
It was
hit weird
designed by
trees.
David and Ernest,
Yeah, yeah.
exclusively weird polecats and like perpendicular. I mean, that's
Everything
why
was
I
just,
loved it too.
it was actually a fan. It was like I really love the gym. And actually our newest gym in Norfolk is totally like the spiritual successor of Norton, where Sudbury is, it's kind of its own thing. And I love Sudbury. It's like a great gym to train at, and it's like going to be a fantastic gym for the U.S. finals. But
Hmm.
Norton or Norfolk is going to be like more of like everything's, there's like little things to find, and weird
Yeah.
technician parkour stuff to do.
What are some of your gyms from a design perspective? What are some of your favorite gyms that you've been to?
My favorite gyms I've been to. So I just got back from the European Championships at Hal 5, and I've been there a number of times. And I think Hal 5 always, I think everybody knows that it's a great parkour gym, but also like from a design and like from a design perspective, I feel like they've actually been quite innovative on some like very common sense things that like once I saw them, I was like, why haven't we just been doing it this way? Like, for instance, like a lot of bars will be in a gym will be attached, there might be welded, there might be like flanged to the walls. But Hal 5 does this thing where they
Hmm.
have like these vertical bars go and then they attach the bar across, meaning like their bar can kind of be put at a weird different angle, but also you can slide up and down. And it has this like slight modularity, but also it's just like a more elegant solution than, I don't know, going into it. Their grip on the rolls is fantastic. It's like totally jealous of that, because it's just one of those things like the patina of grip you have to earn in the gym. And
Yeah.
both my gyms are
It's
brand
all the
new, so
beer from their like brewery next door, just as
oh
the
yeah.
particulates get in the air.
Um, Origins I like, because it's quite like, it was actually informed a little bit of my design at Sudbury because I wanted to go away from the nichey little type of
Mm-hmm.
tiny preable things, and I wanted to have structures that were a little bit more oblique and a little bit larger format because what you lose in the technical maybe aspect of some things, I feel like you gain with like people being able to have it as a little bit more of an open canvas, so instead of this wall being like
Yeah.
you kind of have to jump to this block or stride or whatever, it's like
Mm-hmm.
larger platformy type of things.
It
Which
feels
I
more from the clips that I've seen also, I really like it. It suits itself more as a competition space or a training space for athletes who want to be in competitive parkour because Will is a great example of a speed athlete who came up through the OG Hub Norton gym, but like it's very different when you're doing 5 speed runs a week in a gym that like everything is essentially technical foot placement because there's just stuff all over the place versus an old Apex Boulder or an Origins where it's just big columns, walls. You can kind of like actually get up to top speed and move through a space. And I think Origins has kind of, as they've added and removed stuff, goes through phases where sometimes it feels a little more open and sometimes it feels a little bit more closed and technical. But Sudbury looks really fun. I just think about the lines that like the line that Brandon and Mason did the other day, where they're doing this sort of like catbacks into a really cool like dive gate at the end. Like that kind of thing you couldn't do at the old hub space gym because there's just not
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
space to do it anywhere.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that both spaces like hub, it's like the first hub was maybe total including like bathrooms and lobby with like 5,800 square feet. So we probably had like 5,000 square feet of gym space. Um, but it was also, I mean, if you ever been there, it was 30 feet wide and 120 feet long. So it was like, or however long it was, whatever.
It felt like a
But it was like,
batting cage as
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
baseball former baseball player.
It's like an alley. It was hard. I mean, it was horrible for a number. It was cool for a number of reasons, like the floor is lava aspect, and it was really fun to do. But like organizing two classes at the same time, everybody's
Mm,
on top of each other. Any event, you're like, I can only go one way, kind of. So it's like, and so the new spaces are both like 8,000 square feet and square, and like, this fucking ceiling's 35 feet. It's too high actually, because whatever. And so it's different for like
yeah.
a bigger thing. But I mean, there's some things that it's like I wish more gyms like we do a lot of modular obstacles. Like Norfolk is 100% modular, and I can kind of get into that in a little bit. But this one we have a bunch of like modular pieces that we move around that really radically like change up the space. And I know a lot of gyms do a lot of modular stuff.
Hmm.
But like we reset our gym probably like once a week, once every, if there's a really cool challenge, we might leave a feature up. But it's like a rock climbing gym. It's like it's reset. It's like you get
Yeah.
bored of like the same. I would at least, going into it.
Yeah. I mean, Apex Denver has not changed. Rob will be listening to this and probably they've added a handful of bars, and then the big tramp wall was like the first edition in probably a decade. But like Apex Denver, there's basically 4 big fridge blocks that move around that reshape the gym. And even that is enough to keep it feeling relatively fresh. I mean, I would love it if they had the like time and money to do a total redesign because it was designed in like 2011. And as
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, parkour gyms have improved in the last 15 years. Especially when you go to somewhere like Hall 5 or something that Hall 5, and you're talking about ceiling height. I wanted to ask you, I feel like my sweet spot, this is maybe getting boring for our listener, but I'm gonna say it anyway. My sweet spot for ceiling height is that like the sloped pitched ceiling where you have some sections that are maybe like 15 to 20 feet. And then you can do what Hall 5 does, where they have bars that actually hang or welded into the girders, or an Unparalleled Movement in Montana did that as
yeah,
well with their second gym, which was to me Unparalleled and Hall 5 feel spiritually very similar, like the aesthetic, the design, the way that they kind of have like clusters of technical areas and then a lot of open space. Um, and just like how they like you couldn't beat Unparalleled was again, it's next to a brewery. Like you could go have your open gym session, smash a couple pints with the boys afterwards, bring your
yeah,
draft beer back downstairs.
yeah,
It was fantastic. Hall 5 was the
yeah.
same way, you know?
Oh, dude, I love it. But also, Hell Five has Belgian beer, which is half of the reason
And a
I was telling.
bakery. Oh my gosh, the morning sessions there. I'm like, I can get like a fresh
I
pain au
know.
chocolat. Go
I
train. This is. A God's
The
gift
little
to the
a little
world.
espresso, a little affogato. Yeah, no, told Dominaria, I was like, half the reason I'm here is because of the beer here. I was like, I was like the best beer in the world. I'm like, um, yeah. Well, that's the thing
Almost
is
as good
like,
as
I think like,
Yingling.
yeah, the Yings. Um, one of the things is like what I actually am craving is like, uh, you know, the the building at Hal 5 is part of the character of the gym. Like they're like huge concrete slabby windows, like you're saying, the beams that run through that they've been able to like put into their feature set and stuff. And it's like I'm always on the lookout for some sort of like old factory type of building with like brick wall where it's like a big cost and reason Sudbury opened so late was because we were like, I was like, I have to build a shell around this first to like
Mm-hmm.
be that the walls can be usable, and that became a whole nightmare with the town and the fire safety issue, and probably cost me an insane amount of money to to do, but also to tear. It was a whole
Yeah. It
it was a whole
aged
thing.
you prematurely. That's why you got a
Oh
little couple
yeah,
gray hairs now. I
yeah.
don't.
The
I
what?
don't think you do.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like my plan of action with all these gym things, right, was like I knew we were going to be moving out of Norton in October of 2025. And so 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I started looking for new space to move Norton into. I'm looking for space, and then the realtor I'm working with shows me what ends up being Sudbury. I'm like, you know what, this is far enough. We're probably an hour away from where Norton was. So I was like, you know what, let's open a new gym. Whatever. We're
Mm-hmm.
due to open in July of 2025, 2024. 2024. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll open this one. This gym will get to wind up for like a year. Then we'll be able to get a new space, build it out, and have kind of like this turnkey situation with Norton, where we shut down and we move right into it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We get blocked up with red tape here because of fire safety issues and dealing with architects. Sudbury, when people do come for the nationals, you realize like the first thing you see when you come in, and there's like a Bugatti dealership and a Lamborghini dealership. It's a very rich town. The zip code here is
Very
1776.
parkour.
Yeah,
Very
it's very
parkour appropriate.
yeah. So they have more they're more particular. The town ended up being fantastic with us, but so this took like a year. This gym opens September, then literally have to open it. Can't even celebrate it. I have to go tear down my old gym. The gym in Norfolk that I had leased out, I leased out in like April, and the
Mm-hmm.
building just delayed and we didn't get it delivered to us till the end of November. And so I'm like, great,
Oh my
like, all right, I can
gosh.
commit a lot of time to building this gym out. But by now, Norton's closed for months. This gym's brand new, and I'm like, great, I'm glad all this happened at exactly the
Yeah.
same time because it was sick for my mental health and for the organization. And I had a kid. I had a kid during all of it too. So I'm like, you know what? I'm like, Sonia, you're good just being a single mom while I go build stuff, right? Like, it's hard, it's horrible, but it's all the
Yeah.
dust
Well,
has settled now, and it's
that first year is notoriously easy. So,
yeah. I was like, I'm a heavy sleeper. I'm not waking up. Um,
Oh my God.
yeah.
I can tell
So
that's sarcasm because I know you and Sonia. So,
that's
yeah.
actually the thing, dude.
I'm
The
sure you
the
woke up
sarcasm
and read
thing.
Silmarillion to Lucian multiple times a night for the first several months.
I'm like, we got to get you. We got to get you up on that Legolas stride tech. Um, yeah. So we've kind of been bouncing around. So I don't know if you want to. I don't know if there's anything that I've skipped over in my ADHD
No, I mean,
fueled.
you're good. I was curious about what that kind of like, what that transition was like, because I think like Boston as a community is so interesting. And I want to pick your brain a little bit about what you think has led to so many young, like the really impressive thing to me about what you and the rest of the coaches and staff at Hub have done is that there does genuinely seem to be a pipeline for youth athlete to adult athlete. And that is something I really don't see at a lot of gyms. Like, I think you see a lot of gyms and you get these really promising 9 or 10 or 11-year-old kids. And then you check back in 3 or 4 years later, and it's like, well, especially here in Colorado, like, no, they went and they're like Nordic skiing, or they're like, downhill snowboarding or whatever. Like, they switch to a winter sport, or they get really good at track or something else. What do you feel like you've learned from all these years of coaching, building the space, managing the space that has helped foster an environment where you can have something like Will, Gio, and Brandon being three and now the best younger athletes in America. I mean, best athletes in general, but the fact that they're also young is phenomenal. Like how have you like consciously and maybe unconsciously shaped that pipeline a little bit?
Yeah, I take 100% credit for basically everything. No,
I
um,
take credit
I,
for David Ehrlich, so we can say it's actually I am the reason the Commons
yeah,
exists
it's like
by virtue of
that.
David.
That's the tree of influence, right? Like think of, it is funny to think about that tree of influence. Like you
I don't
inspired
take
David.
credit for
Now,
David Ehrlich.
no, but it's like, he claims you as a really a big influence, the biggest
Yeah.
influence in his training. And so it's like, the butterfly effect. What happens if you're not there? Just like, do we never have join or die, right? Do we never have anyway? But I thought about it a lot, right? Because like I do pride myself in being a really active coach, and I feel like I've been coaching for a really long time, and I do just love coaching. I've always vicariously like celebrated all the thrills and like worked through my athletes, which I think is one of the hardest attributes for me to teach a new coach, right? Like not every great athlete can be a great coach, right? But like you caring, and you like freaking out the same way when someone learns their Kong as when you learned it. And like that's I think like a thing that I've never lost, which I always love. I was like teaching an adult class Monday, and I was teaching someone um a Kong, and I was just like spazzing out, and I'm like, I've taught how many people how to do Kongs, right? So, and I think that's something that I've tried to breed into everybody who's worked at the gym is like parkour's supposed to be fun. Parkour's supposed to be like, you're supposed to be spazzing out with them over it, like you're there, whatever. Um, but like when it comes to like, the longevity of some of the athletes in the sport, right? So even like James or Z or Brandon or Will, who are all kind of coming up on like some of them over like a decade of it, right? It's not like, one coach or this, but I think, and it's not Hub also, right? But it's like the community in Boston's always been um, something I love about living on the East Coast, why I can never probably leave, is because I feel like the East Coast, it's very easy to understand where you stand with people, and it's very real, right? So like when you come to a community session, right? Everybody there is going to be genuinely supportive of you. No one's going to be like mean at you, but when you like don't land something well, like it's not a secret. Like I shouldn't say someone, Ernest will yell at you. He'll call your stick bullshit, and it's like this idea where it's like, cool. It's like, you're not in this weird space where it's like, do they like me? Do they not? The community, I think, is incredibly supportive.
Can we take a second
And
to do an
yeah,
offensive Ernest Labonia impersonation? Do you have an
hey,
Ernest that you want to drop?
motherfucker.
Hey, you call that a stick?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, what the fuck is that? No, you know, he's gonna be pissed if he doesn't watch podcasts. So we'll say, what do you call it? Shout out my best friend Ernest.
Who's the
But anyway,
best?
so back to it, it's like what keeps them in, right? It's like some of these kids like naturally are like that's their thing. James, right? Very little credit for James. Like I can be like I showed James the door of this movement side, but like since day one, he was just training like 8 hours a day, and I think like that's his thing. And he's just like I just want to trick every day, and I'm like, dude, the body of work he's had with just
Mm-hmm.
a full time job of training every day, and it's crazy. But I feel like something that I can take responsibility for is trying to help foster a really active community. And for years, this was kind of me just setting up regular jams and getting kids to come out and setting up events like Hubbable that can be these pinnacle events for kids at the gym to look forward to, or setting up competitions. Even at Nessa, we were just setting up a bunch of like events to get people to get to do something together outside of like the free forum. Hey, come and train,
Mm-hmm.
forever. Um, and so I think like it's always been active now. Like thankfully, David has like taken that torch in Boston and been able, he's radically inclusive of everybody. He'll show up at your house and like pick you up and drive you to a jam. And I think like, but I think also having a spot like Hub in an area the same way that like Origins and any gym community, it's like you keep, especially in New England though, you keep people in this ability to keep training throughout winter, which is a huge
Mm-hmm.
lull point, right? You have 6 months of winter in Massachusetts sometimes where you're stopping to train, and so having like Hub particularly as people's like third place to go to in for them to
Mm-hmm.
find their community. Um, has always been good. But that's where I've kind of reflected on, is where I'm like, I can't take credit for Brendan being like a genetic freak, amazing athlete, or Will or Gio or some of these other kids, but it's like giving them the environment to be able to like thrive and feel comfortable here and then feel like it's their home gym type of thing is like totally something where I'm like, it's always been very intentional of anybody who comes to gym. Also, it's not just like if you're a competing athlete, but like people walk through the door, we're all quite personable. We're always like trying to know people, inviting people out. It's not super corporate,
Hmm.
like we're not kicking people out directly when open gym ends or whatever, um and hyping people up. And everybody here trains, so it's like this is the community. And then and then sometimes we get lucky, like Brandon, or I mean, Gio and Will and a couple of the other kids that were early on with them. They all were at the gym for a while before Brandon got there. And Brandon's a very gregarious, like extroverted kid, and he literally like got them together to like be friends because it's like, Will, I love him. He's one of my first students at Hub ever. But like Will would have just trained by himself the entire time. He still would have been where he's at and everything. But I've always like thought like Brandon was kind of the glue to like bring them together and like reach out to them and like start their teams when they were teenagers, like
Hmm.
and get together and make it fun. It's like they all are seriously good athletes, but like their training sessions when they're together are like they're 10 years old. Well, they never 10 years old, but they're like little boys together, and they're doing
Yeah.
they have this game lightning stick that they do and like all these stupid things that they do, and they're immature, but it's fun above everything, right? It's never been like I had to go beat Tim Champion. I had to, whatever.
That's a great. I'm really curious because I am trying. I messaged Will and Brandon and Gio to do a 4-person podcast episode because I want to get all of them on. Because unfortunately, for people who don't get the chance to meet them, I think that they're all the types of people who are not necessarily going to go out and make a ton of content, and like share, their daily training with the world or whatever it is. I say unfortunately for me because I want to hear more, about their story. But Brandon in particular, what I saw from the international, like especially outside of the US community, felt like when he beat Tim, it was kind of like, oh, this kid got, like this kid's getting lucky, but he didn't really get his flowers. And then he just demolished last year at SPL. Like it was not even close in any way, shape, or form. And he really just stood out. How, like, just take a moment as a proud coach, dad, community organizer. Can you hype up Brandon because he has never been to IMAX, right? He's not been to like some of these European spots that people look at as like the measuring stick type spots. And when you see his clips in the gym, you're like, that looks pretty big. He's probably pretty good. Oh, he did good in comp. Yeah, maybe he's actually a little better than I thought. Like, how good is Brandon?
All right, so where do I start with this? Well, first off, I want to, everybody is their training partners, and so the three of them, Gio and Will and Brandon, all like exceptionally good athletes, right? And they all have their own little attributes, right? And so Gio this year is going to be, I think he's going to be a force at in skill. Will, incredibly technical, but like Will is actually like, I always thought about this with Will, but I'm like, if and no shade to my short kings out there, but if Will was Brandon or Gio's height, he'd be the best athlete in the world. Since he's a kid, he's had to keep up step for step with Brandon and Gio with
Yeah.
everything they've done. He's a foot
He
shorter than them. And it's
he
like,
reminds me of Jimmy Pereira so
yeah,
much. The way that he moves, the energy, the acceleration. I think some of it is probably because he's shorter, like he can get more steps in and it does affect like the way that you can accelerate in short distance and stuff. But watching him do the big Kong Pre at not Quin is
Pierce.
it Quincy?
Pierce,
Yeah,
yeah.
at Pierce, yeah, the big Gong Prix with like Davis and Rizzo, and then he's like whatever 15 and 5'4". I don't know
Yeah,
how tall
yeah.
he actually was at the time, like still bouncing it with Jimmy, who's also like 5'4", 5'5", was really
It
cool.
was it was actually a super proud moment for me to introduce Jimmy to Will, because both of them also are like, Jimmy's a bash, and I'm like constantly, I'll have like one beer around Jimmy, and I'm like, you're the best parkour athlete to ever live. I was like, maybe besides Robbie, but I was like, I was like, I think pound for pound, I don't know if anybody's better
Yeah.
than Jimmy Ferrer. What do you call it? Same with Will. But so it's always been fantastic watching. I've always been in awe watching them keep up because it's not, I shouldn't say keep up, but like to train alongside them because like some people like have days where they're training at 70, 80%. It's like Will's for 10 years been forced to train at 105% through everything. And he just has impeccable tech. Like, since he was a
Yeah.
kid, he'd come into the gym for open gym, do his class warm up, and then go work on like fundamental stuff. Whenever other kid like runs into his tag, whatever. So, um, and then Gio's fantastic, and Gio has like the mental side of it, and he's like creative, and he has
Really cool
100%
line
send.
building.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like,
His line
he
building's
has,
gotten really good.
but Brandon is like, I was warning Tom and Renee pretty early on. I was like, hey, I was like, because it's like there's a hard component, right, where it's like running hub, it's like I want to see the kids succeed to the highest level, but then being SPL, I'm like, Tim's a really great champion to have, dude. He's a freak
Mm-hmm.
of fucking nature. His name's Tim Champion. He's never lost a competition ever. Like when he
Yeah.
walks out, when he goes into the time round, he walks out, you're like, holy shit, it's a great champion to have at the pinnacle of the
Yeah.
organization. And so I was like, hey, I was like, I was like, Brandon's becoming a problem. And he went out and competed one year in his first year, and he got to finals, which was awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, what a lot of people in parkour don't understand is like, I've seen it for years now at SPL, dude. The pressure is so insane for people. People in any even a local competition will start to have their stutters and everything, but in a time round, like in the time round of SPL, which I think is the best round of competition, my favorite one is the time round because it's just like I don't know, clear cut. Dude, people throw every time. People throw up after it, not just because of the
Mm-hmm.
exertion of it, but it's like you're in front of a fully packed house there. There's thousands of people watching online. There's a camera right in your face. It's a lot. And so the first year,
Mm-hmm.
everybody gets a pass of like understanding the level that they're at. And so Brandon got to finals that year, and then when he won, and but Brandon's a fucking freak, dude. He's an absolute freak. Like he has a lot of genetic things, like a lot of kind of things that really put him ahead, but also like,
Predispose him. Yeah.
yeah, like you should throw this up on screen, but I'll share a picture of him from the time round last year where he does that plyo from the bar cage across, and he sticks it because he flashed every single challenge in that, which was incredible. Um, but if you watch his ankle dorsiflexion, his toes like literally touch his shins. And not only did he not get injured, but he stuck it. And it's like
Yeah.
crazy. It's Mel Rivera, shout out. She took the picture and she sends it to me later that night. She's like, "What the fuck is this?" And I was
That's
like, "Did he
he's got the
did he bounce
Brandon
this?"
Douglas shins.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Brandon's the same way. He can touch his ankle, like his shin bone to his toes, and he will like that's how he prefers to stick jumps, which is insane, but it is super helpful if you can do it safely,
Yeah.
obviously.
It's one of the biggest attributes of like a really great skill athlete is like how's your stickability, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
is how his torso's 1 inch long and his legs are 18 feet long, so his swinging is just like incredible. But like dude, he's just like everything he does, he has like a really, when you watch him do something, if you watch him on a video doing something, I don't know, I even know how to articulate it. But every time I watch him do something, and it's like if you're in the gym and you watch him do it, you're like, how did he do it and do it so casually into it?
Yes,
People
that's I
forget,
think
people
his
forget.
problem.
Yeah, yeah,
He makes it look so inevitable. Like when he does things, you're just like,
such a
well,
cool
yeah, of
term.
course it happened. Like it just looks like the outcome was predetermined the second that he did the cast, you know? Like you can see the shapes that he's making, the power that he puts in, and other athletes it looks like a surprise. And I think that when you have this like element of inevitability, it's amazing, but you can also suffer from it, and that's something I think like still to this day for the listener, one of the things I think that he reminds me of Dylan is if you watch like Dylan's 2014 videos or something, like the descents that he does, things like that, the way that he moves, it looks on video like, well, there was no other possible outcome of him going down this 5-story or 4-story building, cascading on like windowsills, slaloming between like pipes and these like incredibly like it looks so inevitable and simple the way that he does it, and the execution is so flawless that your brain doesn't process the difficulty the same way that somebody who stops a little bit or stutters or looks a little out of control, that
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
gives your brain that chance to catch up and understand actually the difficulty of what they're doing.
That's the thing is like, it's I've never seen him really be like physically, even the video that you saw today of him and James just kind of pushing like a standing jump out. Like they started
Mhm.
that off. They, started off doing like, an 11-foot standing jump and bouncing it once or twice. And then it's just like, they just kept pushing it and Brandon just keeps pushing it until it's like 11-8, 11. But I think last night he might have gotten a little bit further on it and then does this jump behind me. I'll, whatever.
Mhm.
But dude, if you look at it, it's completely fucked up. Like Dave and I were talking, like, could we do it from like the step in? And we're like, we could probably, like, but just to,
Yeah.
and that was what you saw in the video was first try too. It's just like, going into it. People also forget that like last year, not only did he like actually, so one clarifying point, he was very dominant throughout the thing, but one thing that we need to improve on at SPL and we're going to be improving on this year is like last year because of the way the points ended up running out, because the first round, the community jam round is like Tim's round. Like he's so
Mhm.
dominant in that round, it's incredible. Like that round, for people who don't know, you're doing 6 challenges within 20 minutes. You have an incentive to get them done faster. And Tim's very usually done twice as fast as everybody else with these challenges because
Yeah.
has an incredible mental ability to on-site challenges, and
Mhm.
Brandon has some time to catch up to this, but Tim's the best competing skill athlete of all time, until proven differently. But
Otherwise,
like,
yeah.
yeah, but like the year Brandon won, 2 years ago, SPL 3, it's like Tim comes in and fucking like nearly breaks his wrist in the time round and then gets to this crux point where he has to do a big 180 to swing, bounces it, whatever, and then has to do a gigantic dive Kong. And
Yeah.
and a shout out to Tim here is that he looks at Tom and Tom has like the points. He's like, I have to do it on this one, right? Because Tim knows the points
Mhm.
too. He goes, if he doesn't do this, he's not going to even make podium, whatever. So shout out, very close that year. Last year, if Brandon hadn't done that final swing where he tears off his shirt, Tim would have won. It was
Okay.
very close. And like, even though Brandon had an incredibly dominant performance, it's like how the points were laying out, which is something that I wish like we had done a better job at communicating to our commentators, but also just like to the viewing audience, because like anybody who knew, we were like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, like this moment of like, will he land it right?
Mhm.
And it like hurts his ankle like the try before, and so I was like, oh fuck. But then Brandon does
Yeah.
it, wins, and then goes and places third in speed, hanging out. He didn't even he
Yeah.
wasn't even trying. He was like injured. His ankle was injured. He has to like got quite close to Sibe and Tange. And so I'm just
Yeah.
like, which is not a thing that people even talk about. I'm like, you guys know that he also like fucked up everybody else in speed too, as a side
Yeah.
quest.
Well, and then now he's out here like planting trees to learn do more spam more Congainers. So triple threat coming in.
He's had like he had for a while like a little bit of a shoulder injury,
Mhm.
some sort of labrum thing. So he's been taking it easy on some parkour training, and then Sean Batista broke a rib of his like 2 months ago sparring. So he had to like, he couldn't like extend a lot. I was like,
Yeah.
maybe not broke a rib, maybe bruised a
Crazy.
rib, but so he's been
Yeah.
doing
Well, based on
his
the
free running
standing
arc.
pre's, looks like his rib cage like, full expansion is back.
Yeah,
He's
but to
able to
but to
hit full
but to
extension.
put a period on it, like we just did the European Championships and for SPL, and like the women's division was like, it was actually maybe my most favorite like women's competition ever. Like Miranda, Noah, Camilla, like I'm missing some people, right? Awesome. Skill was sick. Style was awesome, right? Miranda's
Mhm.
going for like the triple crown, and it felt like we were seeing like the people who are actually gonna like podium. like at that,
Hmm.
level. And then the men's division was like, it was a fun competition, but I was like, couldn't help but be like, and no shade to any of these athletes, maybe a little bit of shade, but I was like, it kind of feels like we're feeding people to Brandon and Ellis right now. It's like they're just kind of getting put into the fucking meat grinder of like, not all the, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, every knows a puncher's chance, right, for everything, but I was like, the level, I was like, you know,
Yeah.
I was like, dude,
And competition, what athletes, I mean, this is the other interesting thing, and I'm curious about how, because this is kind of a common thread that maybe is worth tying, like pulling on a little bit. Competition is always different from training on the street. A lot of the best street athletes are my favorites. You wouldn't see do well in any competitive setting, either because it becomes power oriented or because they just don't have the ability to mentally tap in. Like, that's definitely the reason I started parkour and drifted away from gymnastics and then baseball and track and field and some other stuff, is because I always loved the practice and I hated competing. I dreaded competing with every fiber of my being. It was like, I wish I could just practice. But of course, they're like, well, you can't just practice baseball. That's dumb. You got to go and play the game. And I'm like, can I just like scrimmage? Like, can I just like get a bunch of guys together and hit a ball around? And when I found parkour, I was like, oh, this is a sport where it's literally just practice. This is ideal for me. Um, so how do you, as both somebody who is running a program where some kids are going to potentially, or adults want to go into competition, some just want to kind of be there, and a competition and event organizer with SPL, how do you feel like you guys try to balance like representing sport parkour versus representing the sort of broader, all-encompassing culture of parkour training?
Okay, so I'll kind of try to answer this from like two sides, right? So from the SPL
Hmm.
side, a big conversation that we have is like, sport parkour is like the genre of sport parkour. It is a way, like, it is competing through it, right? And it's not trying to say that, the format of style dictates the best overall capital P parkour style athlete of all time. This is the format that we're competing in. I think that Tom and Rez have done a really great job at like um, setting up the simulacrum of like, what are the attributes that we look for in some of these athletes. With like, speed has always been pretty cut and dry, but skill each round tries to kind of take a little bit of a piece of like, what do we do when we're training parkour and how do we kind of codify that, right? The jam setting
Hmm.
is like a bunch of people doing challenges together. You're lining up to do challenges, right? The time round is like trying to show like, can you actually string together like this series of challenges? The championship round, the finals round is, do we value people who are able to do like complex challenges in few enough tries? Like, do you have, are you a well-rounded athlete and do you have like control over it? And in style, I think like a really big addition recently has been the combo round. It's something that like for a while was like, people aren't really doing long 20-30 second lines on Instagram or YouTube, right? It's like, hey,
Hmm.
there's a whole era of athletes who are doing like combos. Like Denali's a really great example of like somebody who's like very plyometric with his movement. He does lines too, obviously, but
Yeah.
and so I think it's something that kind
Basically
of,
just combos. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then, and actually,
Which,
the
speaking of, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this from a million people. You guys need to just physically beat the judges when they don't score combos correctly. This is the thing that I've talked about with so many athletes, and I'm just gonna say it to you. I'm sure you guys have told that I've been there when you tell the athletes what a combo is, and then they still don't fucking do it, and it's like, I don't blame the organizers or the athletes, but I'm like, if you're a judge, Chris Hollingsworth, if you're listening, and somebody takes a step, just give them a 0. Like, you need to do that. Otherwise, the athletes are just gonna keep gaming the round and turning it into, some people
short,
play
yeah.
the game and get a 7.5, and some people take a couple extra steps but do harder stuff and get the same score or higher.
So I'm gonna
And
go on a
that
quick. I'm
is
gonna go on a quick segue here because, all right. So
yeah. Do
here's
your
here's one thing,
segue, do
right?
your segue.
So here's I'm gonna try to hit a couple different points here. and I'll elaborate no further, and I won't accept any questions. No, but all right. So one to caveat what I'm going to say, right, is SPL is Tom and Renee's format, and while all three of us run the league, it's actually quite freeing for me to be able to be on the side of like the audience perspective. Like I run the broadcast and like the social media and talking about like how does like an audience member view it, right? And like Tom is the like format nerd about it, which is
Mhm.
awesome, right? And so I love us having our lanes, and we all have input, right? So just to caveat that I'm not the decision maker
Mhm.
solely here about some of these things, right? So caveat. Second off, if people are thinking about parts of the competition, they're like, why aren't they doing X, Y, Z? I promise you, we've had 40 hours of conversation about it behind the scenes, right? At some level, in its right. So I think, not saying like I don't ever want to hear input, but I just want people to know it's not like, oh, well, we've never thought about, fixing the thing. Combo is a really exciting round, but it's also really hard because um, to be a good combo athlete, you need to have a really large trick library. You also need to be like a great athlete as well, and you need to like at a certain level like actually be able to comprehend what we've communicated to athletes over email, WhatsApp, in-person meetings, video demonstrate, et cetera, right? But it
Hmm.
does take like a high-level athlete to successfully do a great combo, right? I think a really great example of this is I'm gonna forget I'm gonna mess up forget his name but spinning turtle, right?
Wesley,
Like
yeah.
Wesley, incredible athlete, huge trick library, incredibly dynamic. He might have the best execution of like understanding combo, right?
Hmm.
Everything is plyometrically connected and stuff. All right, so it's hard. Combo's a hard round to do generally. So to give the athletes some grace a little bit, like you're like, yeah, just do, just pop everything. It's like, yeah, sure, same. Going into it. Athletes are communicated with some of like the rule sets of like what is transition movements, what is breaking movement, right? What is considered a
Hmm.
setup trick to something, right? And then on the other side, it's like we have a lot of talk about our judging or judges, right? I stand pretty firmly that like I've usually agreed with how the leaderboard ends up looking at the end. And I think people really get caught up in like what the points actually say versus like, and they look at it, what's a 7.5 globally to the
Mhm.
history of parkour competitions versus like that score is based within this competition.
Yeah.
And so at the end of a competition, end of SPL, I usually look at the leaderboard and I'm like, this feels correct. Could some people move around, but like, the past 5 years, I'm not like the wrong person won, which almost every other style competition has made grievous errors in, and every year I'm like,
Yeah.
it's whatever, because, it's that's how.
Judging is hard, dude. I mean, I've been there. Christine obviously has judged multiple NAPC and SPL style rounds, and like, so I've been in those conversations, and like, I guess what the reason that I bring it up is this is my pet peeve because combo round is my favorite to watch,
Yeah.
and I think that a lot. I think I'm not going to say a lot of them. I think some of the athletes maybe don't understand, or they are like unclear if they can get away with it, and so they try it, and when they're not penalized, I think it just doesn't incentivize them to be like, oh, I should have done the thing that was actually according to the rules in the way that you see. Like, I mean, it's the same as what Tom has talking about, Tom being a format nerd, all the formatting around sticks and how anal it is about a stick. If it's just like, oh, well, if you stay on it, however you stay on it, it's a stick, it quickly, people will then, you know, intentionally or not, it will become taken advantage of. And so I was like, oh, this is my nerdy thing because I love the combo round, because I love seeing, I think Ed excels in that round as well,
Yep.
like dynamically linking three things in such interesting creative ways, like Wesley, who is one of my favorite athletes to watch right now. um and then I see athletes who are at their level that don't do a selection of tricks that they can execute plyometrically, and I'm just like, guys, they
Yeah.
just like somebody needs to get a DQ score 1 or 2 times, and then they'll just not, then they'll know like, oh, I wasn't it. Okay, cool. I messed up. and didn't play by the correct rules of this part of the game, in the same way that like somebody picks their foot up after a stick or does a little hop, doesn't count as a stick. Like, sucks. It's still amazing feat
Yeah.
of physical skill, but like, anyway, I won't, we don't even need to go into that. I just
Yeah.
wanted to throw that out
I
there
will
because
say,
I think,
I will say that one thing is like combo now, and for the past year, maybe two, I forget two, it's now ranked, right? So now it's not even like
mhm,
the judges didn't have to waste the time on people getting caught up on, all right, was this a 7.5? Because the crappy thing that happens with, and I know Denali has some pretty big opinions about like live judging as well. But like what happens that sucks is like the first person goes out, you give them an 8, right? Now
yeah,
everything that you do has to be kind of related around that.
trickflation.
Imagine, yeah,
Yeah.
or like, but now everything needs to be shoved into that gap if it's the worst run.
Hmm.
So now everything's ranked and they're ranked each round. So it makes it a little bit easier to be like, what, they executed the best. I don't necessarily need to readjust my scores and go into this. And I actually love it because the judges get a moment to like readjust where they're
Yeah.
at and go
I
good. But yeah,
like that
combo,
too.
yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
the move. I think vibe judging, I'm very much in the camp of like, to me it's telling that what you said earlier, and I think this is agreed on by almost everybody that knows parkour. Nobody believes the numbers. Like, everybody looks at the end, and I've been in the room at Art of Motion, like looking over the judges' shoulders at SPL, at every major competition, and it is true that it has happened in the past. People go, "Uh-oh, this person's in first place. I don't think that they should be in first place. Do you guys agree? Yeah, okay, we must have messed up some of the scoring. We should probably adjust." And it's like, I think that instead of trying to like hide it, and this is again what I wanted to say also when you're talking about the combo round, is it's really hard to run a competition. People, I think, have a lot of things to say about it and a lot of criticism, that either have never competed, have never organized an event or a competition, or have never been at a major competition, and they don't understand the 75 variables. I mean, it's like SPL a couple years ago, half of the women's division are Japanese, and the only one who spoke English was Hikari. And she spoke English at like a pretty fun, much better than I speak Japanese, but at a pretty fundamental level. So when you're trying to explain like what a plyometric landing is, and Nagane is like, yeah, I don't understand any English, you're kind of like, hopefully she gets it at
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
point, you
yeah.
know? And there's always
And
extenuating circumstances, but I think that's why vibe judging in parkour to me is just like, if you get judges who've been in the sport for a long time, you can look at a run and be like, that was better. That one was cool. I liked that one more. I like that one more. And 90% of the time people will agree. And the numbers are just there to like provide that with some validity. And that's just like my personal opinion. And I'm like, you don't even need to like, this
yeah,
isn't a like SPO should do more of this or shouldn't do more of this. But when I look at something like Fig, or any time that people are like, we need more objective scoring in parkour, I just think that's total bullshit. Like, I don't think it will ever work, because I don't see how you can score a cork rail pre to cork in full out on a
and,
6 foot
and there's more
wall.
variables, and there's
Like,
more variables to like a style run that's above like what it reads on paper. Like there's the scope
mhm.
of it, how they win it, all those things. And
How
I
it
mean, one more,
looks too. It's just like aesthetic is such a part of us. Like, I would always way rather see a steezy, like really nice looking thing versus something that's maybe technically a hair more difficult but doesn't look as good.
exactly, yeah. And everybody, and I think it's like it's every time that people disagree with it, it's actually just fantastic because I love that people care. It's awesome. Like Denali is like excellent competitor, and he
Hmm.
has a really um a really different opinion than we do, and it's awesome because I'm like, dude, at the end of it, it's like it's awesome that people care about this competition at this level. Like that's really cool. And it's like things will change. And it's like, style competition in 5 years is not going to look the same as it is this year and so on. And and people always talk about like having like the judging, like who are the judges and everything. And I had this conversation with I forget who was there, but people like are like, why don't you have this person judge? And I'm like, well, our judges come out like multiple days before the event, go through an insane amount of like training and just like judging old SPL runs just to like get past that like original like, oh my God, I'm into this. They have to like learn all these formats. They have to go back and forth. Like, they're with Tom for like, 8 hours a day. Then they have to work for 3 days straight. And so I'm like, yeah, like, you have like, I don't know, somebody, a larger name or something, or someone, it's like, do you guys
Mhm.
want to come sit in a gym for 5 days?
I
You
mean,
know?
I've seen Dom's judging. I would not recommend getting that man in a judging panel again, particularly not after those $3 beers kicked in.
We'll move on. We'll move on.
I've
Um,
only say I was like I say that because Dom was my first guest here, and he'll be the
oh
first
yeah,
to
yeah.
admit that he is the ultimate hype man, which is not always what you want in a judge.
It's actually, it's another little quick segue, but Tom and I had a really, if you know Dom, he's a little bit of a, incredibly prolific athlete. He's also kind of a wild man, but he kind of had a
Gregarious.
yeah, yeah, but he had a really great point where I think Dom is very aware of like his status in parkour, and I think he's very aware that like him being at an event. Imagine this. Imagine it's your first SPL competition ever, and you are nervous and whatever, and you just do your line and you fuck something up, whatever. And then Dom runs out of the audience and gives you a high five and hypes you up, dude. Like, it's so awesome of him. He doesn't need to like.
Yeah.
He's the most popular athlete in all of parkour. Like, that's so sick of him. And it's like he's such a great hype man. He was just at way to the top, and he's like, he's never like Tom's never like talking shit about people. He's just there, every single person, hyping them up to the point where his voice is gone. And like, there's been days where it's like, and it's like, I don't know, people don't see the behind the scenes, but it's like Dom will be at SPL and be
Yeah.
like day 3, and he's like, I need cough drops, and he's like, it's like he's getting ready for his job to go hype people up, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
And
And
he's in the practice rounds like, "Oh, I can't believe you fucking did that, mate. You're throwing that in the competition." Just going insane while people are like putting their lines together, getting
yeah.
yeah. I love it. Like I said.
If anybody doesn't need to be doing that, like, it's us, it's like, it's very admirable where I'm like, and I think he knows that like that's a really great place for him to like move in the sport versus just being, I don't
Mhm.
know, being old, old man yelling at clouds type of thing or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
that's how we
but
spent
sorry,
20 minutes talking about gymnastics. This is actually a great transition point for me to ask you, though, the same question, reflecting on it from the perspective of, being a gym owner
yeah.
and in that space, because Dom, and this sort of like the vibe judging, I don't care who wins a parkour competition because it doesn't change my perspective of that athlete's validity or role in the community at all. Like I don't it's just not relevant to me because it doesn't really rank on like what I consider important to parkour culture. I think it's great that like we have competition, but when people are so anal about, for instance, like the judges need to have like, well, it needs to be these people and consistent and it needs to be judged like this, and like Dom can't run on the course, or like he shouldn't be judged, this person shouldn't be judging. Who fucking cares is that's kind of my takeaway, and some people do, and I think it's good that people do because I think competition and the sort of like formalization of parkour does have a role in portraying it as a legitimate sport. But on the flip side, I also personally land in the side of the camp where I'm like, eh, if somebody is throwing down at a jam, if somebody goes to a classic spot and does something innovative and interesting and unique that nobody's ever thought of, that is infinitely more interesting to me than who won a category at any parkour competition, right? Like that's way more interesting when I see Shay doing like Kong gainer punch full off of that like slopey wall. I'm like, that's so much cooler to me than Shay's winning KOTC run. So how do you as a gym owner balance like giving people both of those pathways where it's like without pigeonholing them or trying to like put your own perspective into it and saying like, yeah, you can be like a Brandon, go this competitive route, or you can be just like a street rat.
Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so this is actually I actually feel like it's kind of an existential risk thing for gym owners. And actually a couple months ago, like last year, I rounded up as many gym owners as I could in New England, in the Northeast, and tri-state, to basically like convince them that, and hopefully this can actually serve for maybe a wider thing. But um, okay, you and I have been training parkour for what? It's come 20 years, more than 20
Almost
years,
20
right?
years. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we loved doing parkour because of the open thing. Do whatever you want, follow your path. The exploration part of it was probably huge for us, just going out and finding spots, the social component of being out in a cityscape, the freedom to be like, I can today, this week, train this one little thing, whatever. Um, but like, how many people have we trained with over the past 20 years that have fallen out of the sport, right? That have fallen out who are just like, like whatever
Hmm.
this, whatever, because I feel my thesis here is that like we live in a survivorship bias of like we think that parkour is for people who are like ADHD and want open-ended like thrill seeking or challenges, or treating like a movement discipline or a movement practice, right? And really what I think is that like we're probably, if things were perfect, we'd probably be a minority, because a lot of people love having seasons to their sports and having goals and having like clear outcomes of like their training. And for a very long time running Hub, I was like, I'm designing the gym for kids like me, going into it.
Hmm.
And but in reality, it's like there's a lot of kids who have stopped doing parkour because they're like, I'm not like loving this open-ended thing. Hey, can I pause you for 1 second? My phone's gonna die. I'm gonna go get to a
Oh
charger
yeah.
thing.
Go for
Just
it.
cut it. Just cut it here. Pretend I said some sort of. Is this an okay?
Now we have an American flag in the background, so that's good. Yeah.
I know. Do this flag. I didn't. By the way, this is a quick thing. I didn't put this flag up for everybody who
Is it
constantly.
is it blue? Does it have a Punisher skull on it also?
Yeah,
What's going on
there's
back
a
there, buddy?
couple thin lines on that one. We're the last defense. No, but the people who constantly comment to me about this flag, I didn't put it up. It's like 40 feet wide. I'm not taking it down. I don't know what to do with that much material. Anyway.
Not You got to wait until you get a tread on me, daddy
Oh yeah,
substitute
this is so
flag.
good. So I'm gonna get this. Okay, so to catch back up, my thesis is like a lot of people, a majority of people would probably love parkour as one of the activities they did. Having something where there's a competitive season, there's an off season, there are events to train towards. And I think this was something like later in my parkour training, once I was starting to compete in SPL, like filled in such an awesome place where I was like, I love parkour. I love training with my friends. I love being out there. But then having like SPL to look forward to, like gave my summer focus and gave me like, it was like, I need to work on XYZ. And it was invigorating, right? And so I met with all these gym owners. And if you're a gym owner out there, I think you can never take away capital P parkour, right? People come into your gym for recreational classes, for their open gyms, for you guys hosting community events. That's always there. For a kid on what in our team classes here, they still get the experience of capital P parkour, of parkour generally, right? But not offering and not having a team program, it's just removing these options in these other places for kids who like, which I think is probably a large amount of kids who like would love structure in it. It also gives parents like something where it's like, yeah, we have these recreational programs. We also have a team program where they go and compete, right? Like we also have this thing,
Hmm.
where we have all these other gyms they go to. We have the New England Youth League that they compete in, and so it just sucked when I was starting to think about some of these things that we don't have that route for those kids who would thrive in those settings. And I'm like, how many of my friends would have stuck in parkour a little bit longer if like, if there was a little bit more formality, if the option was there, right? And this isn't to go and change
Hmm.
and be like parkour has to be all competitive, right? But is it that bad to give them the option? It's a great thing. Like our
Yeah.
competitions are so sick. Like these kids have friends at all these other gyms. Like when we go to Rome or we go to AM Parkour, we have a bunch of other gyms that don't have like a really big community around them. These kids like link up, dude. And I'm like, if there was a non-creepy way to film these kids like seeing each other, it's like it's giving them the thing that we get when we go to jams, but for like a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's like they go and they're
Yeah.
hyping each other up, and it's like still parkour, so you're not like pissed at whatever. Some people take it seriously, but so yeah, it's like
And you can take it seriously. This is, I think, a great thing about what SPL has done. I hated the word sport, like the phrase sport parkour at first. I just thought it sounded kind of corny. Like parkourist, when Callum uses it, it's something that I've grown used to, and I actually think rebranding it as this is an like a purposefully constructed subset of the discipline, the holistic discipline of parkour that is easy to judge and compete in and organize. I think it's fantastic because, yeah, I think you're totally right that we, for a long time, community leaders self-selected unintentionally for people who were like them. And it's very easy when you've had success in the sport. Like I have tried to compete many times. Sometimes I enjoy some of it. I love the community round. Every time I get past that, I'm like, "Oh, I hate this again." Now I feel like I'm that 10-year-old kid who's being forced to go to the gymnastics meet, and this is just, like, ruins everything that gives me joy in the sport. I cannot, as a coach or as a community leader, say that is a universal experience. I therefore need to structure my facility, my community, the way I talk about parkour to only accommodate my experience of the world, particularly in America, where, to your point, a great thing about parkour is that it isn't codified to the extent that youth soccer or gymnastics or something is, but parents expect it. And if they don't see their kids, like even if the kids could maybe be fine without having something to train for, a lot of times it's like if the parent who is paying the bill isn't seeing their kid progress in a sort of linear, visible way that they can say, well, now I go to the barbecue and your kid just made all county soccer. Yeah, my kid just came third at, Eastern Parkour Championship. Like parents want to say that.
Yeah.
Like, and they're the ones that are paying for the classes. And so you have to accommodate the fact that like we exist in a society, particularly here in North America, that is structured around this like hyper capitalist competitive mindset. And if you try to completely alienate your sport from that, while the people who are in it may find a lot of solace in that, like it is going to alienate a ton of people who otherwise maybe then need more than anyone to be exposed to this capital P parkour culture and realize like, oh, I competed in youth soccer and gymnastics and basketball and all this stuff, and it wasn't for me. And then I found parkour and realized I don't need to actually compete after a couple years or whatever. Um,
Yeah, and
I'm curious too. Sorry, go for it.
sorry, but yeah, it's like I was gonna kind of segue off, so I'd love to hear your question before I go
Yeah,
into my.
I was gonna say the other thing that's curious to me is like when you look at other action sports, there is the sport route, but if you look at, like, skateboarding or climbing, sports that have, like, an equally or more heavily rated, like, street component, there also is, like, the formalization of, "This is Leon 25. This is, like, the Hollywood." I don't know whether the Hollywood I don't know skating as much, but, like, for climbing, right, it's obviously incredibly formalized where you can, like there's all of these established routes. I also wonder if there's more that we could do as a community for the non-competitive athlete to provide them with concrete goals that they can measure themselves against that are not in a competitive setting, but in a street setting. And this is something I've talked about a ton with Rob, is just more of the like the way that Spot Destroyer has challenges set up all over the city. It's like some apps are trying to do this, but really popularizing the idea of like making more approachable concrete things that people can go and like work up to and be like, I really want to, because for me that was what competition did for me. It's like, oh, I can't wait to someday I'm going to hit the battery Kong precision, someday I'm going to go and hit this like classic, I'm going to do all the Tampa strides, right? It's like those were the non-competitive but measurable outcomes that I was aiming for in my training that provided me with that sustenance. And I think that while we have them in parkour, there's also we haven't communicated to people who are not heavy in the sport. It still is like you have to find them for yourself, or you have to be enough in the sport that you're like, oh, if I'm in New York, I should try and do these jumps at Battery Park. And I'm curious what your take is on that. Like if you feel like that's also a viable.
Yeah.
pathway.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it a lot of times in a gym setting too, is like something that's fantastic about climbing is like you can walk into a climbing gym and immediately know what's how to be
What to
generally
do.
in the yeah to do you're in the in group type of thing.
Yeah.
It's very hard without some sort of like shepherd in a parkour gym to know what to do. And so like we've messed around with a couple of concepts over the year of like trying to formalize at least within the gym of some sort of like route idea or challenges where you're kind of dictating similar to like climbing routes, like you know for this line it's
Yeah.
like use your hands here, whatever. But um one thing I wanted to say uh about competition really quick before we move off of it too much. Well, first off, parkour has also always been inherently competitive. It's just not been formalized competition. But every jam you ever go to, a bunch of people line up to go do a jump, and you're like, I'm going to do the ply out, I'm going to do the front flip out, whatever. That's still
Yeah.
competing at some
Yeah.
level. So it's not like ever there's never been any form of competition just because it's not been ranked. But um I feel like it might be an edge risk, but I do think again for hopefully the gym listeners out there that like we've had awesome success with our youth team. It's been a really fun addition to our program, but I actually feel like there's a bigger risk of like in gymnastics. I think I see this right. There's gymnastics. You kind of start to see the sorting of gyms into competing gyms
Mhm.
that are taken seriously and they can demand serious tuitions and serious commitments from their athletes, and they're able
Mhm.
to with that outside of the money bad charging money bad thing, it's like you'll have more resources to be able to feed back into your community and provide like events that your community and your clients like to do. Or you have the gyms that are like we're not going to be competitive, and they end up being like this. I kind of listed my little speech I did to like the McDojoing of parkour, right? We've also seen like martial arts gyms. Like some martial arts gyms are serious training gyms, and they're taken seriously. Their coaches are serious. They have serious athletes come to visit to do master classes. And I like to work at that type of place. And then you have gyms that are like karate, and it's like kid comes to class for 6 months and they get a black belt type of thing. And when we have no differentiating factor with parkour gyms to compare for an outside person to compare and see that with, I could say all day that Hub is the most legitimate gym in Massachusetts. But how does a parent know that? They go, I don't know. But the other gym, like they give my kids headbands and they like to run around, whatever, you know.
If it has a warped wall, it's not good.
Yeah, yeah. And so
That's how you
and
know.
and so like it's actually like a thing where it's like, hey, like every gymnastics gym that I know, um, they have like a parkour or kids flipping or ninja program type of thing.
Yeah.
And like eventually, if you're not able to compete on legitimacy and authenticity on a place where like a
Mm.
parent or the paying person can see, you now have to start competing on other things, right? And so now do you make your beginner classes easier and easier and easier? Do you never retain a student for them to get more elite? And so now does your advanced or intermediate level class look like my beginner class because you're never having the level
Mhm.
pushed up? And does that basically like nip at the bud the growth of like your program to where like you can have, I don't know, it's one of these things where I feel like
Yeah.
it's actually one of those things where it's like it does not have to be through exclusively the lens of competition, but competition has a lot of other halo effects for a gym to participate in that are great for your for your community, for your coaches, for your revenue, for some of these like larger community supporting effects. And I don't know. So yeah.
That's a great point because that's something that I've never thought about, but uh, the average person, at least here in the US also, and I'm sure you've seen this, they would not be able to tell the difference between an ex-competitive gymnast doing a terrible lache precision where they almost land on their butt 7 feet to a foam block and Brandon doing like a 15-foot lache rail pre. They'd see those and they would look essentially the same to them. And so even when you're talking about tapping into like authenticity or what that proof of concept is for the parent who wants to sign their kid up, or for an adult who's like, oh, I'm really interested in doing parkour, I could go to my local gymnastics club down the street that's 5 minutes away, or I could drive 20 minutes to this parkour facility. If there are no third party accolades that you can kind of tap into that look legitimate, you're going to rely on that person's discerning, the ability to discern whether the posts that you have on your Instagram demonstrate good parkour or demonstrate bad or mediocre parkour. And as we have seen throughout the last 20 years, the average person cannot, in fact, discern at all between elite level parkour and what like any athletic human could probably do after 2 weeks in a gym. So,
Yeah. I mean, like when you walk into Hub, sorry, I'm going to move the camera around a bit, but bunch, you have right here goes home of skill champion Brandon Hooper. And then over here is home of speed silver medalist this year champion Will Hess. But like that's the first thing that people see when they come in. So they're like, oh, it's a
yeah,
legit,
that also adds so much to the culture for people. That's like, whereas people who are already intra community, if it's like somebody sees that's join or die as so like they're gonna do a gym thing during join or die 7, that means a lot for someone who's in parkour. But if you're like home of the join or die gym session for someone coming in for the first time, they don't know what that means.
yeah, yeah,
They're gonna look it up and see a bunch of kids jumping into a trash can and be like, that's actually a negative
yeah, yeah.
association for me. So, um, I know you said you had one more thing that you were gonna kind of transition to, and I'm curious what that
That
was.
might have
You had
been that
another
might have
thought.
been that of like my so I mean
Okay.
to wrap it up, I think like if you are running a program, I would consider USPK is running a really great right. USPK is running a regional competition circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's really easy to get involved in. I think like it allows people to join in. I've been making constant pleas for people to start competing because I also think like one of the downsides of some really elite level people training at the gym is that I'm like, hey, yes, Will came here to compete and hopefully is trying to go win SPL5 at speed, right? You can come and just do a speed
Mm-hmm.
competition and it can just be fun as like a measure point of where you're at. But if you're a gym owner, I think having a youth league to think about for your like 2026, 2027 season is like an incredible opportunity for your customer base. It gets you linked up and partnering with other gyms in a non necessarily like having to compete over land area and membership type of way. Um, it's been fantastic, and I think like it staves off like the ease of a parasitic organization like gymnastics coming in trying to claim ground. It makes it harder, right? Because if
Mm-hmm.
a
Yeah.
gymnastics studio came in and tried to compete in our league, it's like, what are you gonna do? Like this,
Yeah.
going.
There's an established network of people who can support each other and demonstrate. To your point, like USAG tries to come in and put that together. It takes time, and it's easy to then say, like, well, actually, there's already an existing network, and these are all grassroots gyms run by people who've been in this community for 20 years, not run by somebody who went and got a pretend parkour certification after 3 days and now decides that they're a master coach. So one other thing that I brought up with Sam Kopic on a podcast previously, and I'm curious your take on this because it kind of ties into what you were saying about how competition circuits provide this great framework for kids to meet up and have that jam experience. Something that I don't see a lot of are non-competitive or like more casual. It could still be competitive, but not as structured, um, inter-gym events. And I'm wondering if you've ever thought about anything like that. So like one thing that I was like talking to Sam about that we were brainstorming was kind of like a show and tell style like skill comp where athletes could partner up with somebody from a different gym and like they come up with their own set of challenges, and then everybody, there's like 5 groups of kids and then they all have 3 challenges and everybody shares them at the end or something like that. But I don't know that that's like a format that would be super attractive. But how do you feel about that as an option to continue to tap into what I think is the only way that parkour will grow here in the US, which is like building off of these really fundamental physical locations and giving kids the opportunity to like continue to make these friendships either in their own state or across state lines?
Yeah, I think so I mean that I know it's not the root of your question, but like that ends up being a big part of the experience with our youth leagues. And like this year, like we're about to run our youth finals, and the day after we're doing like a big end of season barbecue party with all the gyms coming down, and we're gonna have like a fun thing. Well, last year we did like popcorn machines and ice cream and like superlatives, and all the kids
Yeah.
got to hang out and just train. But it's actually an interesting idea because it's like I actually feel like where we are in New England, we're actually quite predisposed with having a really high concentration of gyms compared to the other, compared to other parts of the country where like, we have 5 or 6 gyms within like a 3-hour drive from us. And so it's something that like I would actually
Mm-hmm.
love to figure out, because it's also might be an opportunity for gyms who can't regularly compete in a competitive circuit, or maybe like they just have a grudge against,
If they're a younger gym and they've got kids, or they have like kids and they're just like their kids maybe aren't good enough because you've got kids at Hub who've been in it for 5 years, and maybe this gym just opened and it's all new kids, and they're like, well, I'm not gonna really encourage these kids to go and get stomped down by like whatever 11-year-old prodigy Dylan Polin has cooking in the Hub lab. But having, I mean, a barbecue, and what I've heard from a lot of people is like, well, that's a jam. But the difference is that jams are fun because it's with your peer group. And if you're a 10-year-old, you don't want to, and now even more, I understand this now as a parent of a toddler, like the experience of kids with other kids without adults is so different than the experience of like, we'll just bring your 10-year-old to the big jam and they're going to be one of 7 kids there and they kind of go off and do their own thing. And it's like, I would like to encourage more people who are listening who are maybe gym owners to like exactly what you said. It's a jam, but it is actually just Hubbable Junior. Like
Yeah.
it's that experience, but for those kids so that they don't have to carve out their own space inside a jam and they get to have their own thing. The superlatives idea is great. Sounds super fun.
It was very cute, and then none of them are like super, they're just whatever. But I think a big thing also is like, all right, so maybe you find this in your in your experience, right? I've never been to an organized parkour event that's a competition or workshop or whatever it might be without there being the undertone of just jam stuff also happening. I don't think it's something you can
Yeah.
turn off from these things. And so I don't think it's like, even at SPLs, like we try so hard just to make it like this, and it's the end of every day. People have to come on the course and see the child, which is awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, but so it's one of these things where it's like, I don't even think you have the option to set up something with a bunch of parkour athletes that's structured without there being this the sand in between all the blocks that you've
Mm-hmm.
set up of jam stuff happening. And I think like so
Yeah.
many people in parkour against some of the structure components of it. And it's like, don't remember, I'm like the same way. It's like, the reason I was saying about Move NYC is I'm like, I don't want to have to wait around while everyone's going to all these workshops. So I'm like, how fantastic is it that like a whole generation of new people can go and learn from like some really world-class people at the same time there's a jam happening. And so like,
Yeah.
so having something where
You
it's
don't
like,
have to wait. You can go to my workshop, Dylan. Don't worry.
there we go. Yeah, Nico Van Hill's going to be there. What do you call it? But what was I saying? And so it's one of those things where it's like, setting up an event that has some sort of focal point of structure, right? We're here for a competition.
Mm-hmm.
We're here for a workshop or a barbecue or something, because naturally the jam's gonna happen, but like you have to have some step into the room, like step into
Yeah.
the scene, because it happens to me. It's happened for decades. Someone comes in for open gym or whatever, the kids are there for the first open gym and they go, so like, what can I do? And I'm like, anything you want. And that's a shitty fucking
Yeah.
answer. Like, sorry for swearing too much
Yeah.
on this,
That's terrible.
but it's a bad answer. It's the
I've
truth, but
dropped
it's
the F-bomb at least twice,
yeah,
so
yeah.
you're good.
It's a
Yeah.
bad answer, but it's also the truth. Where it's like, do whatever you want, climb on anything. You can do some challenges, and like giving them a seed of where to start, right? So like a quick start book, or like
Mm-hmm.
something like a rock climbing gym where they have routes, or here's some fun challenges that are at your age level type of thing to try. That's a little bit more codified. It's like cool. It's like they don't have to only do that, but it's an icebreaker of coming to the same thing with like a inter gym event.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to kind of call it for this. And I do have one more question
Yeah,
that I ask everybody, which is if you had one piece of media to recommend to the audience, what would it be?
one piece of media.
Media could be film, could be a book, it could be a podcast. And why is it the
Am I
Lord
gonna
of
be
the
the first?
Rings extended
It's actually
editions?
it's actually not, because actually hot take, and I don't want to get into this right now. I don't want to get into an argument, but I really didn't like reading the Lord of the Rings books. Not gonna lie, the two
Extended edition films,
oh
films,
oh the
films.
films absolutely. So if you're on my close friends, you know that it's exclusively Lord of the Rings memes. So, but I might be the first one to recommend it. Can I do it? Uh,
Yeah, go
if
for it.
this isn't parkour at all, but there's a really excellent lit RPG called Dungeon Crawler Carl. Excellent series. I don't even want to explain it, but if you're in parkour, you're probably gonna like the vibe, the vibe of it. It's a very fun thing. Shout out Brendan McCullum from
Yep.
Origins for showing it to me, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be into this. And then I devoured the first 5 or 6 books in like a week, and I was like, why'd I do that? Now I don't have them to read. So I would suggest,
I listened to the audiobook after you recommended it to me. Listened to the audiobooks for books 1 through 7 pretty much back to back over like a week. And I ran more. I was literally like, I can't wait to go for a run so that I can listen to Dungeon Crawler Carl. Because after the first day, I'm like, I need to make a rule for myself that I can only listen to this audiobook if I'm either doing house tasks like chores or if I'm out on a run. And I ran probably like triple the mileage that I normally run that week because I'm like, oh, well, it's only been I've only listened to like 3
yeah.
chapters and like they just got to floor 4. I better find out what's
Oh
going on
yeah.
next. I can do another 5 miles.
So,
Probably why I tore my meniscus,
oh my
actually.
god. Yeah, great book series, super fun. It's, I even my wife's even reading it right now. Like I think it's actually quite palatable for, like so I would suggest that, That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a great, yeah, highly would recommend. And in 5 days, the next one
Yeah,
comes
and I
out.
get it done.
So
Actually, I'm at
actually, it'll probably be out by the time this is public. So if you're listening,
book 8.
go get the newest book.
Yeah, I just yeah, start at the newest book. You will be able to catch up. It's one of
Start at
those,
the
yeah,
new.
it's one of those things. All right, cool.
Don't start at the newest one.
Well, thank you very much, Max.
Well,
I'm glad
Dylan,
that I bullied you into
thank you, man.
letting me on here and shilling all my gyms.
Thank you for such a great chat, buddy. It was awesome to catch up.
Of course, brother. All right, love you. Bye.
Thank you guys so much for listening. That was Dylan Polin. Gonna just go ahead and give another shout out to Dungeon Crawler Carl. If you haven't started it, check that out. It is fantastic. It is a light, just a little piece of levity that you need in the chaotic and sometimes dark world that we live in. And yeah, it will make you laugh out loud and potentially run more, as I said in the podcast. Certainly worked for me. Get your mileage up while you're listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl. I hope you guys got something out of that, particularly in the way that Dylan talks about juggling the role of competition, the kind of vibe of creating a community space in the gym, and how those things can all work together as opposed to working apart from each other, and how they have to be presented to the outside world. I think that that was for me the biggest takeaway, is how intentional he is about messaging and allowing people to see parkour as something that can exist inside of a structure that they can break if they want to. But, balancing that sometimes folks want a little bit more structure, and we need to be able to provide that when they do. Thank you again for listening. That was a great episode. I'm really excited. Next week, we've got Matt McInnes Watson, who's the plyo guy on Instagram. We're talking about all kinds of fun plyometric training. And if you're in just physical training nerd or athletics nerd like I am, you're going to get, I think, a lot of information out of that one. So stay tuned for that next week. And if you're going to be a Move NYC this weekend, we'll catch you there. If you've made it this far, kudos to you. You are an absolute champion. Thank you as always, and I will see you next week.